Today, we're going to look at 3 stories about real people and how the smallest choices they made ended up changing everything. At the time, these choices seemed insignificant, but in the end, they altered the course of not just their own lives, but millions of others. But before we dive in, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, all told in story format, then you've come to the right place. We post a few times a week, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Alright, let's get into it. Story number 1. The final words on January 17, 1977. A 36-year-old man named Gary Gilmore was walked across a cold, empty space in Draper, Utah. He was flanked by guards, not because it was dangerous, not anymore, but because they feared he might run. But Gary Gilmore wasn't going to run. He was walking willingly toward the place he'd chosen to die. The building was an abandoned canned food factory, repurposed for one thing that day: execution. He didn't flinch. He just stared forward. Inside, the room was cavernous and bare. No machines, no noise, just silence, and a single chair against the far wall. Gary didn't need direction. He crossed the room, sat down, and let the guards strap him in. Wrists, ankles, chest. Across the room was a curtain. Behind it, 5 small holes. He knew what was behind those holes. 5 men, 5 rifles, a firing squad. Exactly how Gary had asked to go. Gary Gilmore had been convicted of murder. When he was sentenced to death, his family and the American Civil Liberties Union tried to appeal for life in prison. He wanted it to end, and he wanted to end it his way. But Gary refused. He didn't want to rot in a cell for the rest of his life. So, the firing squad it was. The chaplain approached, read Gary his last rites, and asked if he had any final words. Gary looked him in the eye and said, "Let's do it." Seconds later, the rifles fired. A sportswear company with big dreams, but no defining voice yet. Gary Gilmore was the first person executed in the US after a 10-year moratorium on the death penalty. It was headline news across the country. But this story doesn't end here. Story number 2. The Marketer. A single phrase that could define the company's spirit. Fast forward 10 years, it's 1987, and a marketing executive named Dan Whedon is sitting in a boardroom in Portland, Oregon. He and his small agency are pitching ideas for a young, promising client. That company, Nike. Don believed in the brand, but the ideas so far just weren't cutting through. Something was missing. A campaign, a slogan, and then, like lightning, Don had an idea, and it came from the most unlikely place. Sitting in that meeting, frustrated, Dan's mind wandered, and suddenly, he remembered Gary Gilmore, the news reports, the execution, and most of all, he remembered Gary's last words. "Let's do it." There was something chillingly powerful about it. Don tweaked it slightly. Just one word. Just do it. That would become the tagline, and it all came from a story no one would have guessed. 3 simple words. Words born from the mouth of a convicted killer moments before death, repurposed into a slogan that would become a global anthem for ambition, rebellion, and resilience. Nike's new slogan launched in 1988 with that line, "Just do it." The campaign doubled their business almost overnight. Since then, "Just do it" has become one of the most iconic taglines in the history of advertising. Maybe the most iconic. A convicted man's final moment, a marketer's stroke of inspiration, and a brand's rise to immortality. Some stories don't start the way you'd expect. Some ideas are born from the darkest corners and still manage to light the world. This is a true story. In 2009, a 23-year-old struggling actor named Chris took a date to a McDonald's in London. He was so broke that this was the only place he could afford to take her. But that quickly changed when Chris landed a second punch, which made the guy angry. And as 3 other big guys jumped in to help their friend, Chris knew that he was in trouble. As he walked into the audition room, both the casting directors and the producers were taken aback by his massive black eye. When Chris took off his jacket, revealing his bruised and battered chest, the producers were sold. They told him to go through with the audition, as he was perfect for the role, and all because he got punched in the face. And Kit Harington even admitted in interviews that if he hadn't gotten that black eye, he might not have been famous today. And as Chris proceeded to nail the audition, he had no idea that the black eye he got punched in the face was the reason why. They asked him what happened, but not wanting to scare off the only potential employers he had left, he just lied and said that he'd been mugged. violence is never the answer. But sometimes violence does come to us, and it may lead to great things. For example, Stephen Hawking got punched in the face during a charity boxing match and went on to win the Nobel Prize. And Mike Tyson got punched in the face so many times that he retired and became a successful actor, businessman, and even a pigeon activist. So he tried to run away, but they caught him and beat him up pretty badly. But when they got to the restaurant, they realized that they were sharing a table with a large, intimidating man. At first, everything was fine, but then the man at their table began insulting Chris's date. And being a gentleman, Chris stood up for her and punched the guy right in the face. Now, to be fair, it was a pretty weak punch, and the big guy just laughed. As you can imagine, Chris was pretty scared that night as he walked home with a massive black eye, wondering if he'd ever become an actor given that he now looked like a thug. Little did he know that fate had a funny way of working out. The next morning, he woke up early, put on a brave face, and headed out to a major audition in London. What neither he nor they knew was that the role they were auditioning for was a gritty, fighter-type character who'd been in several street fights, but that his bad looks made them think he was capable of playing the role. A few weeks later, he got the call that changed his life forever. He landed the role of Jon Snow in Game of Thrones. In fact, the producers later confirmed this, saying that they almost didn't cast him because of his good looks. And as the series went on to become one of the most popular TV shows in history, Chris, who changed his name to Kit Harington, became an international star. As crazy as it sounds, this really happened. Now, before we wrap up, please don't try this at home. Sometimes getting punched in the face can lead to success, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing. In 1925, a 21-year-old Dartmouth student named Theodore, or Ted, was caught drinking illegally during the era of Prohibition. As punishment, he was stripped of all his academic honors and banned from writing for the college humor magazine where he had just become editor-in-chief. But Ted had a brilliant idea. He would submit his work under a fake name. Under this new name, he would go on to publish over 60 beloved books, entertain millions of children and adults around the world, and even win a Pulitzer Prize. The new editor of Jack-o'-lantern didn't know that it was Ted trying to get his work published again, and so he was impressed by the work and published it anyway. Now, back then, Dartmouth had a really strict rule. No dating of any kind was allowed between students and faculty. This character was a doctor, a respected member of society. He was intelligent and successful, and most importantly, he was not Theodore Geisel. Dr. Seuss was everything that Theodore Geisel was not. But Ted's father, who was also an alumnus of Dartmouth, had donated a large sum of money to the school. And then something interesting happened. Ted grew to like this alter ego. He enjoyed being someone else. You can break the rules and do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do. You can say anything you want without anyone knowing that it's you. You can push the boundaries and not have to worry about the consequences. And so the faculty were very lenient with young Mr. Gunn. They let him bend the rules a little bit. It allows them to be whoever they want to be. And then something interesting happened. Ted grew to love this alter ego and decided to keep using it. He used it to make people laugh. He used it to entertain children around the world. So when Ted was 21 and in his senior year at Dartmouth, he was caught drinking with some friends. But by then, Dr. Seuss was already a household name. He had become a legend in the world of children's literature, and as punishment, he was suspended from the college and expelled from the Jack. Be someone else for a while, break the rules and do something crazy. You never know. You might just surprise yourself. And Ted's real name was almost forgotten. Again, Ted had been dating the dean's wife since he was 16, which made the faculty very angry. And they especially hated the fact that Ted had been disrespectful to them by using his father's money to get away with everything. That pen name was Dr. Seuss. But why did he choose that name? Why did he even need one in the first place? So they gave him an ultimatum. If he wanted to ever be able to write for Jack-o'-lantern again, he couldn't use his real name. He needed a new identity. Well, you see, the story of Dr. Seuss is actually quite a bit more scandalous than you probably thought. In 1920, when Ted was just 16 years old, he started attending Dartmouth College. And what did he do? He started dating the dean's wife. They knew that Ted was talented, and they didn't want him to waste his potential, but they also didn't want to help him out. So Ted created an alter ego, a character that was completely different from himself. And with this new identity, Ted submitted his work to Jack-o'-lantern once again, and he got it published. You see, when you create a new identity, you can do whatever you want. This is why people create online personas. It allows them to be someone else, to explore different sides of themselves. And that's what happened with Ted. He created Dr. Seuss, and then he used this new identity to publish books, cartoons, and other works. But eventually, Dr. Seuss became more popular than Ted. The books sold millions of copies. The cartoons were seen by millions more. It was until many years later that people realized that Dr. Seuss and Theodore Geisel were the same person. So if you're ever feeling a little bit stuck in life, remember the story of Dr. Seuss. Create a new identity. Thank you for watching.